Welcome to the Reconnect Factor, the podcast of the Power Play Reconnect experience. This is the place where you can rest your mind, play a little sometimes, and reconnect to your unique, authentic, and creative self. I'm your host, Ruth Haskins. I'm happy you can be with me. So what's going well for you today? Just take a moment to think before you answer, because there's always something good. It may have been an encouraging remark from a coworker, or maybe a child who made you laugh or smile, or some little gift that someone gave you. So when we focus, we always find that something is going well today. This week, we continue to talk about different patterns of grief. In the past few weeks, we have looked at the effects of shame, guilt, apathy, grief, and fear in our vibrational expression in our surroundings. Today, that vibrational expression is all in the family. Quote, "This toxic pattern within the broken family system will continue from one generation to the next until one brave survivor finally ends the cycle of abuse." Dana Arcuri. All of us come from a unique nuclear family unit. Within that nuclear family, there are not only a host of personalities, but also there are depths of emotional messages that transfer from one person to another. In modern terms, we call them generational curses. I have a friend who has written an excellent book about this topic. Her book, Transforming from a Caterpillar to a Butterfly, A Guide to Turning Your Pain into Power, is a result of her recognition of the generational curses that she inherited from her family, but was determined not to pass down to her children. So for some of you who have doubts, let me tell you, this is not woo-woo stuff. Not woo-woo stuff. This is real. It is a reason why in so many families there are patterns of behavior and relationships that are established and become long-standing without anyone paying attention to the devastation that they cause. So I won't go too far out on the limb and act as if this hasn't happened in my family. Yes, we have that same situation. Among the men in my family, alcoholism was the generational curse, along with abandonment of families. Among the women, it was choosing men who looked really good. They were handsome, they were well-dressed, they were educated, intelligent, but they were besotted by alcoholism and the ability to abandon their families and their children only to return and then leave again. Yeah, lots of that revolving door stuff going on. And I had to take a look into my own family. Whew, not fun. But I can see the pattern very clearly, starting with my mother's mother. That would be my grandmother. My grandfather was a fine-looking man and well-educated. In fact, we all gained our speaking patterns from him. He corrected us, and there was a reason for that, but I'll get around to it. However, he was also unfaithful, a rolling stone, and an alcoholic. And he abandoned my grandmother, who had 4 children by him, 1 boy and 3 girls. The 2 eldest, my uncle and my mother, were farmed out. If you don't know that term, farming out was a term used during the Depression when a parent could not take care of their children. So they basically indentured them to another family where they could be servants. And sometimes this happened when they were very young. And my uncle and my mother were farmed out when they were between 4 and 8 years old. So more about this perhaps later or in another episode. So the result of this farming out, my uncle became an alcoholic and drug user. He never recovered. He died in his diseases. My mother did fare much better after surviving really horrific abuse at the hands of those to whom she was farmed out to. She did become a registered nurse, and with all of that knowledge, she still succumbed to food addiction, which claimed her life as an out-of-control type 2 diabetic. She also married a man who was a dandy, and I am using air quotes, tolerated the birth of one child. He tolerated the birth of one child and abandoned her during her second pregnancy. My mother's two sisters had children in their mid-teens and later married alcoholic men who subsequently were unfaithful and also abandoned them repeatedly. So I had to ask myself, in looking into my family history, where did this pattern begin? And I believe it came into play with my mother's father, my grandfather, whom I mentioned at the beginning, the fine-looking and well-educated man. When he was a boy, his mother, as the family story goes, walked more than 100 miles through Tennessee to leave him in the care of a boarding school run by white missionaries from the North. Now, you've got to figure this out. This is post-Civil War, during the Reconstruction era. His father was an emancipated slave. His mother was Native American. He never saw his mother again when she dropped him at that school. And the father, typical pattern, abandonment. But abandonment by both parents. So the pattern began. Now, what is interesting is that in the past 2 generations, there has been progress. 2 members of my family have lived long lives in recovery because of 12-step programs and lots of therapy. We are the blessed ones. We acknowledge that our parents and many of our relatives didn't have this benefit available to them, or they didn't reach out for it. Nonetheless, the beat goes on. How so? In a recent family incident, it became apparent that the generational curse of the pattern of abandonment and its consequences continues. It took me a moment to pull back and see what was really happening and to disengage my emotions from something very painful. Fortunately, God works in mysterious ways. Yes, he still does. Danielle's book came to my attention a day after my family incident. It gave a name to what I had just experienced and an understanding of how generational curses, toxic patterns within a broken family system, are still working in my family. I am sharing my story really to help you to identify your story. Generational curses are not just dysfunction in the family. It is the dysfunction that is quietly handed down from generation to generation and poisons the minds and lives of unsuspecting newborn infants. Think about that. These innocent ones, unsuspecting, come into a system where their minds are being poisoned and they don't even know it. Many of us have inherited these toxic patterns inherited from a broken family system, and they have permeated our cultures and our society. Though we may not have acknowledged it until this moment, meaning listening to this podcast, if we pay attention, we will realize that we have felt its existence. We have felt the patterns play out in our relationships, at work, at home, and socially. Grief has been the only reward of generational curses. So, now, it's time to look. Time to decide. Today, it ends with me and with you. We turn our pain into power. More than just a thought, this is the Reconnect Factor, the podcast of the Power Play Reconnect Experience. To learn more about workshops with the Power Play Reconnect Experience, contact us at rchvw.co@gmail.com. Also, you can find Transforming from a Caterpillar to a Butterfly, a guide to turning your pain into power by author Danielle Hall at www.daniellejhall.com. Danielle also has a series of articles in the internet magazine, Just Minding My Business Media, LLC, which can be found on the bookshelf at jmmbmediallc.com. Until next time, take time to rest, take time to play, and reconnect to your unique, authentic, and creative self. Thank you for listening.